At the family gathering, my daughter-in-law actually called security. "Can someone get this woman away from the table?" she said with disgust. What she didn't realize was that I owned the company she clocked into every morning. The very next day, I reassigned her to dish duty. "I'm glad you're here. Stick with me until the end, and drop the name of your city in the comments. I'd love to see how far my story travels." I should have sensed something was off the moment I pressed the doorbell. Normally, my son Marcus would answer it with that familiar, boyish grin I've loved since he was small. But not this time. Instead, it was Zaraya at the door, her manicured fingers curled around the knob like she was queen of the castle. And in her mind, she probably was. "Oh. You showed up," she said, her tone sharp and chilly, reserved just for me, like I was some inconvenient reminder she couldn't ignore. I tightened my grip on the gift bag I was holding. Inside was a hand-knit sweater for my grandson, Tommy, something I'd poured my time and love into over the past several weeks. "Hello, Zaraya. I brought something for Tommy's birthday." She didn't budge from the doorway. Her eyes ran over my outfit, my nicest black dress. Clearly, it didn't pass her inspection. "Marcus is still getting ready. Everyone else is already here." Everyone else? That was news to me. Marcus had called just a week before, his voice tight, like it always is when she's hovering, and invited me to what he called a small family dinner for Tommy's 5th birthday. The second I stepped inside, it was clear, this wasn't that. The living room shimmered with overdressed couples, glittering with jewelry and stiff with self-importance. Their voices hovered low and self-congratulatory, like they believed their conversations were more vital than everyone else's. I recognized a few of them from the social columns. Then I heard it, my name. "Grandma Sherry." Tommy's voice sliced through the grown-up noise like sunlight through a rain cloud. He came running, arms wide. And just for a moment, all was right in my world. "Happy birthday, baby," I said as I hugged him close. He smelled like chocolate frosting and pure childhood. "I made you something really special." But before I could hand over the gift, Zaraya swooped in, her hand landing on his shoulder. "Tommy, remember what we talked about? Grandma needs to wash up first. Why don't you go play with your cousins?" The message couldn't have been clearer. I wasn't clean enough to touch her child. And then came dinner. The table stretched forever, covered in fine china I didn't recognize, probably wedding gifts from her side of the family. They sat me at the very end, squeezed between a vacant chair and one of Marcus's old friends, who couldn't stop boasting about some recent business takeover. Marcus met my eyes once, during appetizers. He managed a weak, apologetic smile. But Zaraya leaned in and whispered something to him, and just like that, he looked away. My heart sank deeper. "So, Sherry," Zaraya suddenly called out during the main course. The room hushed slightly, forks paused mid-air. "Marcus says you're still at that cute little cleaning company?" She said little like it was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Heads turned. I could feel the mix of pity and curiosity in the way they looked at me. "I run my own business, yes," I said softly, keeping my voice level. "I didn't come here to cause a scene." Zaraya let out a brittle laugh, like breaking glass. "How adorable. A business." She turned to the woman beside her. "Sherry does commercial cleaning. Very modest work." The woman smiled politely, but I noticed it, the subtle shift in her chair, the way her body angled ever so slightly away from mine. I've seen that movement too many times. That subtle recoil people make when they believe they're sitting next to someone who doesn't quite belong. I forced myself to eat, but every bite tasted like cardboard. Around me, the conversation buzzed with talk of international travel, prep school waitlists, and stock options. I had nothing to add, or at least, nothing they'd be interested in hearing. Then dessert arrived. And so did Tommy. He wriggled away from the kids' table and climbed onto my lap, chocolate frosting smeared across his fingers. "Grandma, will you tell me the story about the princess who saved herself?" It was our little ritual. It was a story I'd made up years ago, about a princess who didn't wait around to be rescued. She was smart, resourceful, and brave. But before I could even begin telling it, Zaraya shot to her feet, face flushed with fury. "Tommy, off her lap. Now." Her voice cut through the air like a shard of glass. "You'll ruin your clothes." "But Mom, I want to hear Grandma's story," he started. I said now. She yanked him off my lap, not gently, and he whimpered, startled by the suddenness. Then she turned on me, eyes blazing. "I think it's time you left." Everything stopped. Even the man down the table who'd been droning on about his latest business triumph fell silent. All eyes were on me. I felt the weight of every glance, 24 people watching as I was put in my place. "Zaraya, please," I said, barely above a whisper. "It's Tommy's birthday." She raised her voice, addressing the room. "Security? Can someone remove this woman? She's disrupting our family celebration." There was no security, of course. Just the illusion of control she always liked to project. Marcus stood slowly. His face was pale, his lips parted but silent. "Zaraya, that's my mother." "Your mother," she repeated, each word soaked in venom, "doesn't belong at this table. Look at her, Marcus. She's an embarrassment, to you, to me, and to our son." I don't remember standing. I don't remember crossing the room. Just the pounding of my heart and the deafening silence that followed me out. At the door, I paused, just once, hoping Marcus might meet my gaze. That he might say something. Do something. But he was staring down at his plate. The night air slapped my face as I stepped outside. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely fish my keys out of my purse. Behind me, the door shut with a solid, final click. Sitting in my car, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. 68 years old. My silver hair mussed from Tommy's hug. Wearing my best dress, though now it felt cheap, like it belonged to someone else entirely. For a moment, I looked exactly like what she had called me, a tired old woman who didn't know her place. But what Zaraya didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that in a few short hours, I would walk through the glass doors of Meridian Technologies, ride the elevator to the top floor, and sit behind the same mahogany desk I'd occupied for over 3 decades. The very same company where Zaraya worked, unaware that the woman she'd just humiliated was not only her employer, but its founder and CEO. As I drove home through the quiet streets, my hands finally steady on the wheel, I made a promise to myself. Zaraya wanted to teach me about staying in my lane. Tomorrow, I'd show her exactly where hers ends. I arrived at Meridian Technologies at 6:30 a.m., well ahead of my usual schedule. The building stood tall and still, its mirrored exterior catching the pale hues of morning. 35 years ago, I'd started this company in a borrowed basement with nothing but grit and a bold idea. Today, we employed over 2,000 people across multiple states. Miguel, the security guard, looked up from his desk as I entered. "Mrs. Morrison, morning. You're early today." "Couldn't sleep," I replied. And it was true. I'd spent the entire night reliving every moment of that dinner, every smug remark, every pitying glance, every humiliation. My office took up the northeast corner of the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the skyline, but I barely noticed it this time. I sat down at my desk and opened the company's internal system. Typed in her name. Zaraya Mitchell Morrison. Marketing Manager, Digital Campaigns. Employed, 18 months. Her profile photo popped up on the screen, the same cold smile she'd worn the night before. According to her file, she'd wowed the hiring team with her energy and forward-thinking strategies. She was making more annually than I did in my first 10 years combined. I dug deeper. Performance reviews. Project logs. Peer evaluations. And that's when I found them. 3 formal complaints, filed within the last year. All from older employees. One stood out. Margaret Chen, 61, Accounting Department. She claimed Zariah publicly berated her during a meeting, mocked her spreadsheet methods, and suggested she retire and make space for fresh talent. Zariah's defense? She said she was pushing for efficiency and innovation. Complaint dismissed. But I didn't need to read further to know what kind of person I was dealing with. She hadn't just disrespected me. She'd made a habit of tearing down anyone she didn't consider useful. She thought I was just another old woman clinging to relevance. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Robert Williams, age 58, worked in IT support. His complaint stated that Zariah had pressured him into working late hours on her personal assignments, none of which fell under his official responsibilities. She regularly criticized him in front of peers, questioning his speed and his ability to keep up with the new generation. The matter? Quietly dismissed. Her supervisor praised her for demanding excellence. The next file was from Janet Rodriguez, 63, who oversaw the custodial team. According to the report, Zariah had filed a complaint to HR accusing Janet of being difficult and unable to follow simple instructions. The real issue? Janet hadn't rearranged her cleaning schedule to accommodate Zariah's last-minute meeting change. The outcome? Janet was reassigned to the night shift. I leaned back in my chair. A slow, bitter calm settled over me. This wasn't just about a personal insult at a family dinner. This was a disturbing pattern, an intentional targeting of older employees, cloaked in professionalism and protected by our company's hesitation to confront internal conflict. My phone rang, breaking the silence. Marcus. His name lit up the screen. Mom. His voice was tight. Tired. I'm sorry about what happened last night. Zariah was just overwhelmed with the party. She didn't mean to. She called for security to have me removed from my grandson's birthday, I interrupted. There wasn't any security, he said quietly. She just lost her temper. She humiliated me, Marcus. In front of 20 people. There was a long pause. I know. I should have stepped in. I should have said something. You know how she gets when she's trying to host something. Everything has to go exactly right. Exactly right. As if my being there had somehow stained their picture-perfect version of reality. I need some time to think, I told him. Of course. Mom, maybe next time you could try dressing up a little more? Zariah's friends care a lot about presentation. When I hung up, I sat motionless, staring at the soft morning light spilling across the office floor. My son, my sweet boy, who once cried over a bird with a broken wing and shared his school lunch with kids who forgot theirs, was now asking me to dim myself down to make his wife feel brighter. By 8:00, the building had come alive. I watched as employees filed in through the front lobby, rode up the elevators, and disappeared onto their floors. Somewhere among them, Zariah was likely settling in, perhaps already venting to a coworker about her impossible mother-in-law. I pressed the intercom on my desk. Helen? She responded immediately. Helen had been by my side for 15 years, once a receptionist, now my most trusted executive assistant. She was also 62. The kind of employee Zariah seemed to view as disposable. I need you to discreetly gather a few personnel files for me. Of course. Which ones? Start with the digital campaigns team. I want full documentation, performance evaluations, project outcomes, internal communications, everything. There was a short pause. She knew me well enough to sense something deeper at play. And should I ask what prompted this? Not yet, I replied. But I have a feeling we'll be making a few structural changes. Roughly an hour later, Helen returned with a stack of thick folders. The further I read, the heavier the truth became. Zariah's department had the highest turnover rate in the company, especially among employees over the age of 50. Former staff mentioned feeling devalued, talked down to, and systematically edged out. Yet somehow, none of these complaints had made it to my desk. And then came the emails. Filed and archived per protocol, they included one exchange that made my skin prickle. Can you believe they want me working with Janet on the Morrison project? The woman can barely send a calendar invite. Why do we keep these relics around? They're dead weight, space that should be given to people who actually get how business works today. The Morrison Project. A campaign that Zariah had taken full credit for, and received a significant bonus. Yet buried in one of the brainstorming reports was a note, initial concept suggested by J. Rodriguez during support team collaboration. Janet Rodriguez. The same janitorial supervisor who'd been shuffled off to the night crew. I reached for the phone and dialed extension 4247, Human Resources. Jennifer speaking. Jennifer, this is Sher Morrison. I need you in my office immediately. And bring the full organizational chart for the Digital Campaigns Division. 20 minutes later, Jennifer sat across from me, her complexion pale as I walked her through the information I'd uncovered. Mrs. Morrison. I had no idea the situation ran this deep. Some of these reports absolutely should have gone straight to you. They should have, I agreed. But they didn't. Which tells me the problem goes beyond just one employee. Jennifer nodded, uneasy. But for now, I continued, our focus is Zariah Mitchell Morrison. Jennifer swallowed. What action would you like to take? I leaned forward, my decision already clear. I want her reassigned. Effective immediately. Today. To which department? I thought of Janet Rodriguez, forced onto the graveyard shift for not adjusting her cleaning schedule. Margaret Chen, humiliated for using tried-and-true methods that had served her for decades. Robert Williams, exploited for his time and berated for his age. Food services, I said. Dishwashing. Jennifer's eyes widened. That's a dramatic reassignment. She's almost certainly going to file a formal complaint. Then tell her it's part of a new internal development initiative, I said smoothly. Management immersion. A temporary placement to help leadership better understand day-to-day operations. Frame it as a restructure. And if she pushes back? I smiled, cold, unreadable. Then she's welcome to seek other opportunities. I'm sure someone, somewhere, would benefit from her visionary leadership style. When Jennifer left, I walked to the window, looking down from the 42nd floor. The world moved on, unaware. Tiny figures on the sidewalk, rushing to work, grabbing coffee, answering phones. Each person focused on their small orbit, never seeing the greater patterns shaping their lives. Tomorrow, Zariah would report to the basement kitchen. She'd be handed a plastic apron and a hairnet, and she'd scrub trays and plates alongside the very people she once dismissed as obsolete. She would know what it meant to be looked past. Dismissed. Undervalued. And all the while, she wouldn't realize that the woman she humiliated days earlier was now the one deciding her fate. I picked up my phone and dialed the cafeteria lead. There was work to begin. The basement level of Meridian Technologies pulsed with the constant rhythm of industrial dishwashers and clanging cookware. Steam coiled up from stainless steel sinks, the smell of detergent sharp in the humid air. This was the unseen engine of the company, the kind of work that rarely earned recognition but made everything else possible. I stood in the service hallway dressed in a borrowed facilities uniform. With my silver hair tucked into a ball cap and a clipboard in hand, I blended in easily with the rest of the support staff. At 68, I could pass for another maintenance worker with no questions asked. Zariah had been in the dish room for 3 days now. From the kitchen pass window, I watched as she fought with the industrial spray nozzle, her once perfect manicure now chipped and broken. She wore the cafeteria uniform like a costume, plastic apron, disposable gloves, and a scowl sharp enough to cut steel. Her co-workers gave her a wide berth. This is beyond absurd, she muttered to Maria, the woman rinsing plates beside her. I have a graduate degree in marketing. I was managing million-dollar campaigns. And now I'm stuck here like some what? Maria cut in, voice laced with steel. She looked to be in her mid-50s, with calloused hands and the steady presence of someone used to hard work. "You think this job makes us beneath you?" Zariah flushed. "No, that's not what I meant. I'm qualified for something more advanced." "We're all qualified for something," came a voice from the prep table. "Janet Rodriguez." She was chopping onions, her sleeves rolled back and her movements efficient. She hadn't noticed who Zariah was, just another coworker now. "There's pride in any job done honestly," Janet added without looking up. Zariah rolled her eyes when Janet turned away. "Easy for her to say," she whispered. "She's probably been doing this her whole life." I felt my jaw tense. Even here, even stripped of title, authority, and comfort, Zariah couldn't resist looking down on those around her. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Marcus. "Mom, Zariah's going through some kind of internal restructure at work. She's really overwhelmed. Maybe we can grab dinner this weekend? Just the three of us?" I typed back. "I'll consider it." But I already knew my answer. 3 days of observation had told me everything I needed to know. Zariah's disdain wasn't limited to one family dinner, it was part of who she was. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. On day 4, I decided it was time to get closer. I entered the kitchen during the midday rush. The clatter of trays, hiss of steam, and bustle of bodies offered the perfect cover. I made my way to the dish station where Zariah stood, looking worn, her hair limp under the cafeteria cap, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Excuse me," I said, altering my voice with a rasp and a faint accent. "Need to mop this area." She didn't even look up. "Fine. Just stay out of the way." I began sweeping around her station, close enough to overhear her conversation with a young man named Louise, who had been trying, patiently, to help her adjust to the role. "I don't get why they're doing this to me," Zariah snapped, scrubbing a tray with more force than necessary. "It's probably that uptight witch in HR. She's had it out for me since day 1. Louise raised an eyebrow. "Jennifer? She's one of the fairest people here." "Maybe it really is temporary, like they said," Zariah muttered. "Temporary?" She scoffed, slamming a pan into the sink. "Yeah, right. This is a punishment. I just haven't figured out for what yet." She waved a sudsy hand toward the kitchen. "Look at this place. Look at these people. I don't belong here." Louise glanced around awkwardly. "Hey, these folks work hard. They're good people." Zariah gave a sharp, joyless laugh. "Good people? Louise, come on. These are the leftovers. The ones who didn't make the cut. If they had real skills, or brains, they wouldn't be stuck down here scrubbing plates." My hand stilled on the mop. The kitchen noise kept going, but it felt distant, like I'd stepped into a vacuum. Her words echoed in the quiet between my ears. She nodded toward Janet. "That one? Probably dropped out of high school. And that woman earlier, with the accent? She's not even legal, I'd bet. They should be grateful anyone's letting them work at all." Louise shifted beside her, uncomfortable. "Zariah, that's not true." She lifted her chin. "Look, I get it sounds harsh. But some people are born to lead. And others? They're just here to support the machine. They're background noise." Background noise. As if the people around her, who kept the gears turning, who cleaned, cooked, carried, and fixed, were accessories. Not human. Not worthy. I resumed mopping, slowly circling the edge of the kitchen, listening as she kept going. She mocked Maria's English, called Louise naive for defending older workers, and made snide comments about Janet's weight and hairstyle. None of it shocked me anymore. But it still burned. Then, while rinsing off a tray, she said the thing that stopped me cold. "You know the worst part," she said. "My mother-in-law is probably loving this. I can just picture her in that tiny apartment of hers, grinning about how her big-shot daughter-in-law finally got knocked down a peg. My stomach turned. Even here, living the consequence of her own cruelty, she still saw herself as the victim. Still searching for someone else to blame. Your mother-in-law? Louise asked cautiously. She's a bitter old woman who thinks the world owes her something because she's been around a while. She came to my son's birthday party dressed like she just rolled out of a thrift store. Totally embarrassed my husband in front of all our guests. I had to ask her to leave. Not a word about screaming. About calling security. About public humiliation. No, in Zariah's version, she was just protecting her family from a spectacle. Louise tried to stay neutral. Sounds complicated. She's jealous, Zariah snapped. She wasted her life doing grunt work, and now she can't handle that her son married someone polished. Educated. Someone who actually made something of herself. She wants to pull us back down to her level. Down to her level. Like the kind of labor Zariah was doing now. The very work her in-laws and co-workers had done with humility and consistency for decades. I finished cleaning and moved toward the service door, hoping to make it out unnoticed. But Zariah's voice cut through one last time. You want to know the sickest part, she said, stacking trays. My husband, he feels sorry for her. He thinks I should apologize. Can you believe that? I paused just before exiting. Louise's voice was quiet. Maybe you should talk to her. Family matters. Zariah's laugh was sharp, mean. Family? Real family doesn't show up looking like a charity case. Real family knows how to act in public. I stepped into the corridor and leaned against the cool wall, my hands trembling. I pulled off the baseball cap and ran a hand through my silver hair. 3 full days. Scrubbing pans, wiping down prep tables, walking in the shoes of those she used to sneer at, and she'd learned absolutely nothing. If anything, she'd dug in deeper. That evening, Marcus called again. Mom, I'm starting to get really worried about Zariah. This whole situation at work is eating her alive. She's constantly on edge. Angry. Worn out. What has she told you about it? I asked, though I already knew the script. She thinks someone at the company is targeting her. She's convinced it's ageism or some kind of jealousy thing. That they don't like how fast she was rising. He hesitated. She asked me to call you. Said she wants to apologize for the other night. I almost laughed out loud. Zariah didn't want to apologize out of guilt. She wanted leverage. She was running out of allies and trying to repair bridges she'd happily set fire to when things were going her way. Tell her I'm not ready to have that conversation, I said simply. Mom, please. She's struggling. Marcus, I said gently. Has she told you what her new role actually is? Something about cross-training? Like a development program. She's learning other parts of the company? Cross-training. Not dishwashing. Not hauling trays beside the same people she used to call obstacles. Not the reality she couldn't even admit to her own husband. I see, I said. Well. I'm sure she's learning a lot. Later, I sat alone in my apartment, the quiet thick around me. My thoughts kept circling back to Zariah. To the woman I'd watched for 3 days. Tomorrow, I would stop watching. Tomorrow, I would step out from behind the curtain. She would finally realize that the pathetic old woman she'd mocked was the one who now controlled her future. But first, I wanted to see what she would do when the illusion of status collapsed, when the game reset and she realized everything she believed about power and value had just been rewritten. I arrived at the office early that Friday, my mind made up sometime during the night I couldn't sleep. After nearly a week of watching Zariah, my suspicions had been confirmed. She wasn't gaining any insight from her time in the kitchen, just growing more bitter. When I stepped into the outer office, Helen glanced up, immediately noting the firmness in my posture. What can I do for you this morning, Mrs. Morrison? I need you to schedule a meeting. Zariah Mitchell Morrison. My office. 10 a.m. sharp. I paused at the door, then added, and Helen, make sure she takes the main elevator. I want her to walk past every single door on the executive floor. At exactly 10, Helen's voice came through the intercom. Your 10 o'clock is here, ma'am. Send her in, I replied. I turned my chair slowly toward the window, keeping my back to the door as the soft click of heels echoed against the marble. In the glass, her reflection took shape, shoulders hunched, eyes tired, hair tied back in a plain ponytail. Her usual upscale wardrobe had been swapped for something much more practical. Excuse me, she said, her tone clipped with restrained annoyance. I was told someone here wanted to speak with me about my reassignment. No idea why they sent me to this floor. This must be a mistake. I turned my chair around gradually. I said nothing, just waited. Her expression shifted fast, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally something like horror. Hello, Zariah. She blinked. Opened her mouth. Shut it again. You? But, what are you doing here? How did you even get in? I came in through my private entrance, I said calmly, like I do every morning. I gestured to the seat across from me. Please, have a seat. We need to talk. She remained standing for a moment, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for an emergency exit. Her face cycled through a whirlwind of reactions: shock, indignation, unease, calculation. This has to be some kind of prank, she said. You're not seriously telling me you're the CEO of Meridian Technologies? I am. And have been, for the last 35 years. Her legs finally gave out and she dropped into the chair. But, at the restaurant, you said you worked for a cleaning service. I said I owned a company. You assumed what kind? I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. People tend to see what they expect to see, don't they? She sat in stunned silence. I watched her recalibrate. When she spoke again, her voice was noticeably softer, laced with that well-practiced charm she'd used to climb the ladder. Mrs. Morrison, I genuinely didn't know who you were. If I had, you'd have treated me differently? I cut in. Her cheeks flushed. That's not what I meant. Oh? Then explain what you meant. She squared her shoulders and tried a more diplomatic approach. I'm just saying there must have been a misunderstanding. Family situations can get complicated. People say things they don't mean when emotions run high. Ah. So when you called security to escort me out of my grandson's birthday party, that was just heat of the moment? I was under a lot of pressure. It was a big event. I needed everything to go perfectly. And my presence ruined the picture I finished for her. I turned to my screen and pulled up her employee record. Tell me, Zariah, do you remember Margaret Chen? The shift caught her off guard. What? Margaret Chen. 61 years old. Worked in accounting. You humiliated her in front of her peers at a budget meeting. Told her she should step aside for someone who could keep up with the times. Zariah's gaze darted toward the door, but there was no graceful way out of this room. That was a business discussion. Sometimes being direct is necessary, she said. I kept my tone even. And Robert Williams? IT support. You pushed him to work late on your pet projects, then criticized him for falling behind the younger staff. I hold people to a high standard. And Janet Rodriguez? I asked. You reported her for being unprofessional when she couldn't rearrange her schedule last minute. She was moved to the night shift as a result. Zariah's polished facade began to crumble. I don't see how any of this is relevant, Zariah said, her voice tight. Those were valid workplace concerns. I turned my monitor toward her, the screen displaying a list of internal complaints. 3 formal allegations of age-based discrimination. All within the past year and a half. All dismissed because your manager assumed you were simply enforcing performance standards. Because I was, she snapped. Were you upholding standards? I asked, When you told Louise that people in the kitchen are there because they're too unskilled or unintelligent to do anything else. Her face paled instantly. Yes, Zariah, I said quietly. That was you I heard. Every single day this week, I listened as you ridiculed the people around you, people doing honest work with dignity. You learned nothing from it. You deflected, blamed, belittled. She suddenly stood, her expression hardening, the mask she wore slipping away completely. This is entrapment, she snapped. You can't spy on employees like that. I can observe how people behave in my company. What I saw was an executive who targets older staff, who equates worth with social rank, and who lacks the basic emotional intelligence necessary for leadership. Her voice rose in accusation. This is about the dinner, isn't it? You're doing all of this to get back at me. This is personal. I stood as well and walked over to the window, taking a moment before I responded. Do you know what this company was built on, Zariah? On the principle that innovation thrives when every voice is valued. That experience and insight come in many forms, and that a person's background or age doesn't dictate their value. I turned to face her. You represent everything I've worked my whole life to dismantle. Her voice was faint now. So, what happens next? Are you firing me? That depends on your decision. I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. What do you mean? You have two options, I said. 1. Continue your current assignment. Keep working in the kitchen. Maybe, you'll start to understand the way your behavior has affected others. Learn something. Change. She said nothing, but her jaw tensed. Or, I continued, you can resign today. I'll give you a neutral reference that highlights your skills in marketing, without mentioning the real reason for your departure. She stared at me, clearly calculating her next move. When she finally spoke, her response told me everything I needed to know. This is coercion, she said. You're abusing your power because I didn't recognize you. I'm giving you the chance to leave with some dignity intact. Dignity? She barked. You stuck me in a dish pit for a week. You embarrassed me. I treated you exactly how you've treated people under your supervision, I said, calm and steady. The only difference is, they never had a choice. You do. Zariah turned to the door, then looked back at me, her expression twisted in fury. Marcus is going to find out about this, she spat. He'll see what kind of woman his mother really is. Marcus will know, I replied evenly. He'll know his wife has spent months bullying older coworkers. That she had her mother-in-law removed from her grandson's party. That, even now, faced with the truth, she chooses to shift blame instead of taking accountability. Her hand paused on the doorknob. He'll also learn, I continued, that when offered a chance to grow, you chose to play the victim. You're ruining my marriage. Your marriage, I said, isn't my responsibility. But your actions? Your character? That's what brought you here. She stood in silence, her chest rising and falling with sharp, shallow breaths. Then, in a voice low and bitter, she said, Fine. I'll stay in the kitchen. I'll play your game. I'll prove this is nothing but petty payback. Marcus will figure it out eventually. I nodded. Then report to the cafeteria on Monday. Same time. Same position. She left without another word. I sank slowly into my chair, suddenly feeling every bit of my 68 years. I'd hoped that exposing the truth would shake something loose in her, that she might begin to reflect, to change. But she hadn't chosen growth. She'd chosen pride. She would return to the kitchen not to learn, but to endure. Not to confront her flaws, but to polish her narrative of being wronged. She would see herself as the victim of a bitter old woman, never once connecting the dots back to her own actions. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Can we have lunch today? Zariah wants to talk to you about something. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. I'm afraid I'm tied up today. Maybe another time. I already knew what Zariah was planning to say. She intended to reveal who she really was, to use our family ties as leverage to avoid facing the consequences of her behavior. She wanted to turn Marcus against me, casting herself as the victim of my unfair demands. But that discussion would happen on my terms, not hers. And when it did, Marcus would hear some uncomfortable truths about the woman he married, and the mother he hadn't protected. The reckoning was far from finished. 3 weeks after my confrontation with Zariah, the call came on a Tuesday evening. Marcus' voice was strained, weighed down by someone forced to face a difficult reality. "Mom, we need to talk, all three of us." I set down my teacup, noting the tremor in his tone. "About what, exactly?" "About Zariah's job. About what happened at Tommy's birthday. About everything." He paused, and I heard muffled voices in the background. "Zariah coaching him, no doubt. She told me who you really are. How do you expect me to feel about that?" A long silence followed, confusion, anger. "Why didn't you tell me you owned the company where she works?" "Marcus, you never asked what kind of business I own. You assumed, just like she did." "That's not the point, Mom. The point is that you've been meddling in her job, punishing her over family issues." I closed my eyes. Even now, knowing the truth, he was defending her. "Is that what she told you? She says you've made her wash dishes for weeks as revenge." "That's not the mother you know." "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. Just like you don't know your wife as well as you think." "What do you mean by that?" "We need to have this conversation in person. Tonight, at my place. 8 o'clock. They arrived 15 minutes late. Zariah had clearly prepared, her hair was styled, makeup flawless, and her outfit carefully chosen to project a professional image tangled with victimhood. Marcus looked exhausted, caught between two women he was supposed to love but clearly didn't understand. I poured coffee in my modest living room, the same space I'd lived in for the last decade. The contrast between my small apartment and their sprawling suburban home wasn't lost on any of us. "Mom," Marcus began, sinking into my worn sofa, "Zariah has shared some troubling things about her job." "I'm sure she has," I said, standing with my hands folded behind my back. "What exactly did she say?" Zariah leaned forward, her expression carefully balancing hurt and resolve. "I told him you've used your position to humiliate me. That you moved me to the worst job in the company to punish me for a family dispute." "A family dispute?" I echoed slowly. "Is that what you're calling it, Mom?" Marcus interrupted. "No matter what happened at Tommy's party, using your business to settle personal grudges isn't right." "You're right," I replied. "It's not like the mother you know. But it's exactly like the CEO I've always been." I moved toward the window, gazing out at the city lights. "Tell me, Marcus, what do you know about Zariah's performance at work?" "She's successful. Ambitious. Building a career. She's filed 3 complaints against older employees in 18 months. Created a hostile environment for anyone over 50. Systematically bullied people she thought were beneath her." Zariah's composure slipped just slightly. "Those were legitimate concerns," she said. "You told Louise the kitchen staff don't have the skills or intelligence to do better. You called them maintenance." I turned back toward them. "You said Janet Rodriguez probably never finished high school, and you suggested Maria might be undocumented." Marcus went pale. "Zariah, is that true?" "I was frustrated," she said. "People say things when they're stressed." "Like when you were stressed about dinner parties?" I asked softly. "Like when you called security to have the porrona removed from your table?" Marcus looked between us, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means poor little woman in Spanish," I explained. "It's what your wife called me before having me escorted out of your son's birthday party." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Marcus stared at Zariah, his expression shifting through emotions I recognized from his youth, the same look he had when, as a 7-year-old, he discovered Santa Claus wasn't real. "You called my mother a poor little woman." Zoraya's eyes flicked nervously around the room, like a cornered animal. Marcus, you have to understand, she stammered. She showed up looking like. I mean, I didn't know who she really was. So that makes it okay. No. But what? His voice rose, the years of carefully controlled restraint finally breaking. So it's fine to humiliate people if you think they're poor? It's fine to throw my mother out of our home just because she doesn't meet your standards? Marcus, please. You don't understand. No, I understand perfectly. He stood abruptly, pacing to the far end of my cramped living room. I understand that my wife kicked my mother out of our house because she was ashamed of how she looked. I understand she's been bullying older employees at work. And I understand that when Mom held her accountable, she ran home to play the victim. Zoraya's facade finally crumbled completely. Your mother's been lying to you. She's been twisting everything to make me look bad. How? Marcus' question cut sharply through the tension. How has she been lying? She pretended to be a cleaning lady. She spied on me, in her own company, watching an employee who's been the subject of multiple complaints. Marcus turned to me. Is that true, Mom? About the complaints? I nodded. 3 formal complaints in 18 months, all dismissed because her supervisor thought she was just upholding high standards. Marcus looked back at Zoraya, and I could see the last of his illusions shatter. So every night when you came home complaining about being unfairly treated, about someone targeting you, you were actually facing consequences for your own actions. Marcus, you don't understand what it's like in the corporate world. Sometimes you have to be tough. His voice broke. You called my mother security, Zoraya. You humiliated her in front of 20 people. You made our son watch his grandmother get thrown out of his birthday party. I was protecting our family's reputation. Protecting it from what? From my mother. From the woman who raised me, worked 3 jobs to put me through college, never missed a parent-teacher conference or a single baseball game. His voice rose, years of buried resentment pouring out. You were protecting us from the most decent person I know. Zoraya stood, her face flushed with anger and desperation. She's not the saint you think she is. Look where she lives. Look how she dresses. She's an embarrassment. Her harsh words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus stared at her, then his voice dropped, eerily calm. Get out. What? Get out of my mother's apartment. Now. Before I say something I'll regret. Marcus, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. He moved toward the door, holding it open. Go home. Pack your things. We'll arrange custody through lawyers. Zoraya's eyes wild with panic, she looked at me. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To destroy my marriage. I met her gaze without flinching. I wanted you to learn that actions have consequences. That treating people cruelly because you think they're beneath you is unacceptable. I wanted you to develop some basic human decency. Instead, you destroyed everything. No, Zoraya. You destroyed everything. The moment you decided my grandson was better off without his grandmother. The moment you chose cruelty over kindness. The moment you forced Marcus to choose between his wife and his conscience. She glanced once more between Marcus and me, desperate for a lifeline. Finding none, she snatched up her purse and stormed to the door. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, I said softly. It is. After she left, Marcus sank into the chair she had just vacated, burying his face in his hands. We sat together in silence for a long while, the weight of 2 decades of mistakes pressing down on us. I'm sorry, Mom, he finally whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. I know you are. How long have you known who she really is? I suspected from the start, but I hoped I was wrong. I hoped love would change her, that maybe she'd become kinder. He looked up, eyes rimmed red. What happens now? Now it's time for you to rebuild. Focus on being the father Tommy truly needs. Remember who you are beneath all the compromises you've made. And Zariah? I considered her choices. Resignation or continued degradation in the kitchen of my company. She'll find her own way, as she always has. Marcus nodded slowly. Can you forgive me for letting her treat you like that? I moved to sit beside him on the sofa, gently taking his hand in mine. You're my son. There's nothing to forgive. But even as I spoke, I knew that rebuilding trust wouldn't be quick. Some wounds heal swiftly, others leave scars that change you forever. The reckoning had come, but the real work was only just beginning. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I sat in my office reviewing the quarterly reports that confirmed Meridian Technology's steady growth. The morning sunlight poured through the windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where I'd made countless decisions over the years. Helen knocked and entered, carrying my coffee and the morning mail. Mrs. Morrison, there's a resignation letter on your desk from the Food Services Department. Before even opening it, I knew who it was from. Zariah's elegant script filled the page, a formal resignation, effective immediately, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue new opportunities. No hint of reflection, no sign of remorse or growth, just a carefully crafted exit plan to preserve whatever dignity she had left. I signed the acceptance without hesitation. Some people learn from consequences. Others simply endure them until they find a way out. Helen, please process this today, and send a memo to HR. From now on, exit interviews must be mandatory for all supervisory roles. No exceptions. The changes I'd put in place over the past 6 months went far beyond just one toxic employee. I had revamped the complaint system so that any reports of workplace bullying came directly to me. Sensitivity training was now required for all management staff. Most importantly, I promoted Janet Rodriguez to floor supervisor, where her wisdom and experience were finally recognized. Margaret Chen had returned to day shift with a commendation letter added to her file. Robert Williams was leading a project to upgrade our IT infrastructure, his decades of expertise proving invaluable. The culture was shifting slowly but surely. My phone rang, breaking my concentration. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Hi, Mom. Are you free for lunch today? Tommy wants to show you something. My relationship with Marcus had healed gradually, like a bone slowly mending after a break. The divorce had been quick. Zariah had moved back to her parents' home in another state, apparently deciding that starting fresh elsewhere was easier than facing the consequences here, where everyone knew the truth. Same place as always? I asked. Actually, Tommy wants to have a picnic in the park. He's been practicing something for you. An hour later, I spread a blanket beneath a large oak tree while Tommy dashed around the playground, his laughter ringing across the green. Marcus looked healthier than I'd seen him in years, the tension that had weighed on him finally lifting. Mom, watch this. Tommy called, hanging upside down from the monkey bars with the fearless confidence only a 5-year-old can have. Be careful, sweetheart, I called back, my heart swelling with the simple joy of being able to worry about him again. Marcus settled beside me on the blanket, unpacking sandwiches from a paper bag. He asks about you every day. When is Grandma coming over? Can Grandma teach me how to bake cookies? Can Grandma tell me the princess story? And what do you tell him? That Grandma's busy building castles and slaying dragons. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. He's decided you're the most powerful person he knows. I laughed, watching Tommy navigate the playground equipment with fierce determination. Smart boy. Sometimes too smart. Last week, he asked why Mommy moved away. I didn't know what to say. This was the hardest part, protecting a child's innocence while still being honest. What did you tell him? I told him sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and those mistakes mean they have to live in different places for a while. Marcus pulled out juice boxes, handling them carefully. He asked if she's coming back, and I told him I didn't know. Is that bad? Should I have been more definite? I reached over and squeezed his hand. You told him the truth, in a way he could understand. That's all any parent can do. Tommy ran over, breathless and glowing with excitement. Grandma, come see the castle I built in the sandbox. I let him pull me toward the creation, an elaborate structure of sand and sticks that would make any architect proud. As I admired his work, I noticed the other families nearby. Grandparents pushing swings, parents chasing after toddlers, the beautiful chaos of everyday life. This was what I had fought so hard for. Not revenge, not validation, but the simple right to be part of my grandson's world. To exist without having to apologize, to be valued for who I truly was, not dismissed for who I wasn't. That evening, as Marcus and Tommy drove away, I stood in my small apartment, gazing at the photos that lined the walls. Pictures of Tommy at different ages, Marcus graduating college, holiday moments from before Zariah ever came into our lives. But there were newer photos too. Fresh images of Tommy and me baking cookies, building blanket forts, reading stories, a life reclaimed. My phone buzzed with a text from Luis, the young man from the kitchen who had become an unexpected ally. Mrs. Morrison wants to let you know Maria's grandson graduated high school today, the first in his family to do so. She thanks you for the scholarship program you started. I smiled, replying, please congratulate her for me. Hard work deserves to be celebrated. The scholarship program was my latest effort. Helping fund education for children and grandchildren of longtime employees. People like Maria, who had devoted 20 years to keeping Meridian Technologies running smoothly, deserved to see their families succeed. Another message arrived, from Janet Rodriguez. Night shift supervisor position open in Building B, interested? Could use a reference from someone familiar with my work ethic. I laughed out loud, typing back, I might know someone who can help with that. As the sun dipped below the city skyline, I fixed a simple dinner and curled up on the couch with a book. The apartment was quiet, not the heavy silence of loneliness, but the calm stillness of peace. I thought about Zariah, wherever she was now, and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction in her downfall, but sadness for all the chances she had wasted. She could have learned from her time in the kitchen. She could have grown empathy, changed for the better, rebuilt her relationship with Marcus on respect instead of social climbing. Instead, she chose to see herself as a victim, blaming others for the consequences she brought on herself. Some people spend their lives running from responsibility, never realizing that true freedom only comes when you own your choices. My phone rang once more. Marcus again. Mom. Tommy wanted me to call and say goodnight. He's worried you might be lonely. I heard my grandson's voice in the background. Tell Grandma dragons are scared of the dark, so she should keep the lights on. Tell him I will, I said with a smile. And Marcus, thank you. For what? For choosing to see the truth when it counted. After we hung up, I left a small light on in the kitchen. Not because I feared dragons, but because Tommy cared about me. And being cared for was a privilege I had nearly lost. That night, I lay in bed thinking about power. Not the kind that comes from titles or social standing, but the kind that comes from knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. The kind that lets you stand up for yourself and others, even when it's hard. The kind that chooses dignity over convenience, truth over comfort. Zariah thought she understood power. She believed it came from putting others down, climbing social ladders, marrying into a family she considered beneath her true ambitions. She confused cruelty for strength, manipulation for cleverness. But real power, the kind that lasts, the kind that builds rather than destroys, comes from lifting others up. From using your position to protect those who can't protect themselves. From understanding that every person matters, regardless of age, accent, education, or job title. I built Meridian Technologies on those principles 35 years ago, and I would defend them as long as I lived. The next morning, I would return to my office and continue shaping a company culture rooted in respect and dignity. I would review scholarship applications, approve promotions for deserving employees, and make sure the mistakes of the past were never repeated. But tonight, I slept the deep, peaceful sleep of someone who fought for what mattered, and won. Not through revenge or retaliation, but through steady consequences and a firm belief that everyone deserves basic human decency. I had reclaimed my place, within my family and my company. I had shielded others from the kind of treatment I endured. And most importantly, I had shown my grandson that his grandmother was truly powerful. Not because she could hurt people, but because she chose to help them. That was the kind of power worth having. The kind that builds legacies instead of tearing them down. The kind that creates light instead of darkness. The kind that lets you sleep soundly, knowing you did the right thing. Now, I'm curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts below. Meanwhile, I'm leaving you with 2 other stories, channel favorites that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching all the way through.